All right. Welcome, everybody, everyone from LinkedIn Live and Zoom and however you're connecting with us. Welcome to the Polymath Project. Today's Thursday, August 17th, 2023. Can't believe the summer is starting to wind down, but in my mind, we've still got another 3 weeks and one day at a time. Let's just enjoy it. I'm here in Jersey City. I've got one of my old friends and colleagues, Noam Gamady, on the line. Noam is a fascinating mind-body therapist. We'll get into it and all the different multidisciplinary approaches that he's used, that he's learned, that he applies to individuals, to groups. He works with entrepreneurs, with startups, with companies, as far as organizational management and problem solving and just helping companies and the people within them come into harmony on a vision. And I'd really love to hear a lot about that. And I think it'll be very useful for the audience today. Noam, my friend, welcome to the show. Thanks. Welcome back.
Thank you, Arman. It is wonderful to be back.
Yeah, man. It's been, I think it was right during COVID, right? When we had our first meetup on the Polymath. I believe that was in season 2 for us. And you were in a park. I think you were at Prospect Park, and you guided us through an amazing meditation that day. And I took that in. I know that I got a lot of feedback from the audience after people took it in. And that was kind of the moment, wasn't it, for the whole world to actually, if you didn't meditate, that's the time where you first were forced to, in a sense. It was a crazy time, wasn't it?
It was definitely a crossroad where it revealed all the cracks and it also revealed the possibilities, so to speak.
Yeah, it absolutely did. So I want to make sure, I want the audience to hear about what you do, and then maybe during the course of this time, and I know we're both spontaneous, we can go with the flow and see to kind of put it into practice a little bit, or maybe give some examples. But first and foremost, a mind-body therapist, right? That's not a term that we would hear or one would hear quite every day. I love the sound of it, right? So how do you define that? What is a mind-body therapist in general? And you know, and then where do you fall in that spectrum? I'm sure there's different formats and forums for that.
So in order to get into it, I think one needs to put it in context. Initially, when growing up in the Western world, everything is divided. So if you have a problem with your body, you go to a medical doctor, for example. If you have a problem with your mind, you go to a psychologist. And ultimately, this is a Western approach, or has been the Western approach. Whereas mind-body really sees the connection between the two, and we'll go into it also through some examples later on, where if you're feeling physical symptoms or if you have a disease, it's always, I'm going to be absolute here, it's always related to your mental, emotional state. You may not see the connection, you may not put one and one together, but ultimately they're interrelated. So take, for example, someone who's got problems with the colon. Now, the colon is basically processing the food, it's releasing gases, etc. Okay, many of us grew up in environments where farting was not allowed or not acceptable. So you hold those gases in, and when you look at the bigger picture, when you zoom out a minute and you look at criticism, because growing up, one was criticized, and you keep on holding it. And over the years, our body is not meant to hold. Our body is basically a bridge where things come in, go out, there's a flow. Over time, because of our conditioning, because of our traumas, because of different circumstances, we begin to form resistances. Now, these resistances, it's the chicken and the egg. Are they mental? Are they physical? They're both. And as a mind-body practitioner, I'm looking for how to help people release, first of all, the resistance. And a lot of people, especially at this time, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of uncertainty, and that creates pressure. I think we may have spoken about it the last time, but that pressure cooker. We build pressure, and ultimately the goal, my goal is to help release that pressure, because any decisions, any diseases that we experience, you can try and go to a doctor and they'll deal with the symptoms, they'll suppress it. And I'm not saying don't, because sometimes we need that interjection. Bigger picture, you have to address both. You have to, in order to restore that flow, you need to see these connections between the body and the resistance.
Right. That's amazing. That's amazing. So where do you start? Let's talk about. I mean, I've worked with you. I know a number of people that have worked with you, really in the body work side. You know, with but put together for us like a few of the disciplines and the modalities that you've studied, and then it sounds like it's evolved for you, or you're kind of creating your own. I don't know if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but tell us, what are the different modalities that you've learned and combined to bring to your practice?
So to even go that route, just the prefaces.
Yes.
The reason why I believe, and this is a belief, I take responsibility for it, most practitioners do what they do is because they had trouble themselves and they were looking for solutions, and I'm no exception. For years, I would have physical problems. My digestive system would fail, my back. There were all kinds of things that would really compromise both my decision process and my physical health. And I started looking at how to treat myself. So like anyone else, I started going to different experts, psychologists, chiropractors. I started with the mental, physical, and there was no real solution. And then one day, I stumbled on a modality called Feldenkrais. And Feldenkrais is basically a modality that rewires the brain using movement. It's bringing awareness to how you move, what you move, and really focused on slowing down and paying attention to how you do things. And that was the first wake-up call. But it wasn't enough. My urge, my desire to expand my understanding of self carried on. I realized that there's way beyond, and I needed more tools for myself. One of the other modalities that I began working with is called nonviolent communication, NVC. And that deals with the mental, emotional state of understanding that everything you do, everything you will ever do, is geared to meet needs. And that led me into a whole nother path of understanding. Okay, I grew up in a family where judgment was the language. There were expectations, there were disappointments, there was a whole slew of things. And I noticed the connection between my stomach and these judgments. Whenever I felt judged, whenever I judged myself, one of the areas that kept on putting a light bulb was my stomach. Later on, I found a few other things like the breath, which we're going to speak about, meditation, but I began to accumulate tools. So nonviolent communication helped me to understand myself more clearly. I moved on into chakras, bioenergetics. There's a bunch of different names, but ultimately what it boiled down to is how do I get out out of the stuck position? How do I get out of feeling like there's no choice and moving into possibility zone? And this is really, it has continued to evolve. And today I do it with clients. I allow them to have their journey. I bear witness, I support them, I guide them, and it shows up everywhere.
So I want to dig in a little bit to what you're saying there. You mentioned Feldenkrais, NVC, right? Nonviolent communication, and I know there's a couple of other modalities there. Now, with each of these, if people that are interested in these, obviously there's very formal organizations and associations and certifications. This, because a lot of the critique that comes against quote unquote alternative practices is like, oh, okay, well, oh, you're not a doctor, or you don't have training, or where did you study, right? And I know that that whole paradigm is being, challenged, I think rightfully so in a lot of ways. And this, coming from someone here that went to an Ivy League school, and, I'm proud of my education and background, but what does that really qualify you for? I mean, you have that, that degree, right? So I'm not saying obviously studying and having degrees and certain kind of level of proficiency is important, right? And so I just want to make sure and have you actually speak towards the audience that, like, obviously you've studied and practiced and gained certain degrees, and people that want to learn these practices obviously can experience them themselves to see if it's working for them as the way you started. And then a lot of practitioners or aspiring practitioners, there's a path, right? There's some clear paths here for people that are interested, right?
Yes.
Okay, good to know. I mean, I knew that. I just wanted to bring that out because something I'm seeing and very interested in is people that are putting mixed modalities together in this whole kind of East meets West, and a lot of traditional trained doctors here that are opening integrative centers and all that kind of language, but not just for marketing purposes, but actually bringing in those other modalities. Like acupuncture has been a big one that has now gained, I think, some degree of more acceptance. I don't know why it ever wouldn't have been accepted, but obviously there's gatekeepers, right? So anyway, I know that discussion can go in a lot of directions, but keeping it to the fact that, do you find people now more open and more curious and more willing to seek alternatives, or do you still find a lot of resistance from people and from the masses, or what's your experience been?
It's a great question. I think that in order to answer it, first of all, we need to understand the collective consciousness versus the individual consciousness. And there is a difference between the two, because society creates an idea, a route in which we are basically, we go to school, we get degrees, we get married, or we buy a house. There's a whole checklist of what it means to integrate and to how does one relate to success. And it's somewhat rigid, I would say. Now, the collective consciousness will still buy into it. If I have a problem, who's my go-to? Most people will say, okay, I either go to a psychologist or I go to a doctor. At the same time, there is I don't know if it's a revolution, but there's an opening for new possibilities. And along the way, yes, sometimes you kiss toads. Don't always get to the right person, but that's true also for doctors, by the way. You can go to a doctor and there's no chemistry. You can't explain it. You don't feel safe. You don't trust. Has tons of degrees on the wall. Doesn't work.
Yeah, it's like anything. It's like relationships. That's life, right? There's no set rigid path for everybody. We have to explore, and hopefully I find there is a lot of laziness around that. There's like intellectual laziness. It's like we're outsourcing our thinking. Some expert's going to tell me, let me turn on the TV, and there's an expert, they're going to tell me something, and it's great to learn and be educated by books and by others. And like conversations we're having now, but yeah, like, but then you have to go do the work, do the research, and that's a bit of effort, takes a bit of effort.
I guess the direction that I would like or see the possibility is really going deeper. We live in sound bites, almost in sound bites. Everyone's looking for a quick fix. And this path really allows you to get to know yourself and to move from the old, and I'm going to use the word stories, because we live in stories as far as I'm concerned. You tell yourself a story. What is success? What is failure? What is love? It's a bunch of different stories. And these stories for me are an opportunity to reflect, to see, is the story working for me, or am I working for the story?
Yeah, who's driving the ship?
Yes. So the possibility is to let go of the old stories that have kept you in fear, in anxiety, in concerned about the future, and to move towards self-awareness, self-growth, choice. These are, and it is a path. Yes, you have to try different modalities. Some will work better for you. It's not just the modality. It's often, it is the person behind the modality. You know, you can have, as we were saying, it's a doctor, or if it's a acupuncturist, both stick needles.
Yeah.
One you like, one you don't like. So
Yeah.
the openness to moving into new territory. How do you go towards the unknown, knowing that you are safe?
Yeah. Great question. Great question. And we need guides for that. And like you said, it's like you have to follow your intuition and find people you can trust, that you're willing to take a chance, and see where it leads you. So, and you know, without getting into my background, because I know you know some of it, I'm also been a curious seeker and trying and exploring different paths, and have feel like now, you know, at the age I'm at, 49, like I have, there's never an arrival. It's always a journey, but, you know, have found a good set of tools for now that help me, you know, both stay grounded and focused, as well as open and flexible and connected to some kind of deeper, to use your word, deeper voice, a deeper sense of purpose, and guidance, you know, that at least, or maybe it's a story I'm still telling myself, right? It's always needs to continually be evaluated.
But it's a good story.
Yeah.
It's a story that keeps you going. And that's how I met you initially. Your
Yeah.
curiosity was what sparked my interest. Like, okay, here's someone who doesn't take things for granted, who is curious to do a 360.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's how I'd met you through our mutual friend and colleague, Ron Baker, and going back to Miguel Rosell. And these are the signals on the path, right? And then we open a new door and see where it leads us. It's really fascinating. I think what I'd like to ask you, and just kind of brainstorm with you, like how do your clients, at least, or how do you propose that people should measure or evaluate their sense of progress, right? If you're working with someone for 3 months, for 6 months, and I want to get into this, what I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, a little bit of a newer transition into like working directly into corporate environments versus groups. First of all, are you working now mostly with groups or individuals?
I'm working with couples. I'm working with individuals. I have groups on and off. And yes, I am also moving into primarily startups, and there is a common theme in all of them. I think you begin to allude towards it, but how do you gauge success. What is success?
Yeah, what is that?
Like someone comes to you, they are having challenges, they can't necessarily even articulate them. One example is a guy that came to me, he was having anxiety attacks. Didn't know what was going on. He couldn't understand what the story was checking into hospitals. It was really critical. He was fearing for his life. And rather than fixing, first of all, the first part is just to listen to what are people's concerns, what are they negotiating. From there, I can begin to see, okay, yep, there's anxiety attacks, disconnection from the surrounding, a lot of fear about the future, losing control, basically. And within, I would say, the initial success took 3-4 times. It wasn't immediate because we had to, first of all, identify what the story was. And there was a fear. It's about relationships, breaking down relationships, a lot of uncertainty about the future, certain beliefs of how things should be that kept on falling short with this person's reality. When he came to me, there was a lot of fear. And we began to work, first of all, with introducing some basic tools, which we're going to also hopefully go into later, but the first one being breath. Yeah, we all breathe. But intentional breath is a whole nother story. It brings your awareness to the present moment. You can feel yourself with more clarity. Calm yourself down. And now you can begin to see, okay, what do I need to do? Now, over time, there's more and more clarity. You begin to go into understanding, okay, where are you feeling it in your body? Well, I'm feeling it in my chest. What are you feeling in your chest? There's a tightness. It feels compressed. Today, and it's been a while. I mean, we've been working. The initial success was 3-4 times where he felt like he didn't have to check into a hospital. And that was already success.
Absolutely. That's a good milestone right there.
Right. So the second part was like, okay, now how do we reframe? How do we get into the stories that led you to this place? And can we begin to create another narrative? Can we begin to move your state of mind into possibilities? Instead of worrying about what can go wrong, let's change the narrative. What can go right? That flashlight, the ability to see the possibilities. When people often come, they cannot see the possibilities. Their relationship is falling apart. They can't seem to communicate with their bosses, with their peers. They're physically holding pressure and tension. And they cannot see the possibility of it being any different. Within a few times, you begin to regulate your body, your emotions. You get a sense of who you are. And now we can begin to work on how do you choose to be? How do you choose to show up? The process is basically, it starts from identifying what is going on for you. Once you're able to identify, now we can start looking at how to shift that with the tools, with the intention to create another experience.
Yeah.
So One
That's
example.
that's a wonderful example. And to continue forward on that note, in addition to sitting, with you, or I mean, a typical session that you spend with someone would be like an hour usually, or sometimes more, depends on the format.
The format is, usually it's an hour, depending if I'm working with a couple or conflict resolution in the company. It takes what it takes.
Right.
We
Okay.
usually designate 90 minutes for it because
Sure. But I mean, obviously you're running a business as well, right? And this is all part of it. A lot of what you're talking about, and this goes into a bigger conversation about healthcare and wellness in this country and worldwide. I assume that 100% of what we're talking about here aren't things that would be covered by health insurance, typically, correct? Or no?
indeed,
Which is,
it's very interesting what you're bringing up, because yes,
Yeah.
it does create a threshold for
Yeah.
a lot of people. It doesn't make any sense because they can get. It's much easier to get Xantax.
yeah, yeah,
It's much cheaper, and you'll feel calm for a bit. But if the intention is to create longer lasting impact, the cheapest isn't necessarily going to solve it.
yeah, exactly. No, exactly. And that's again, another topic that I know myself, yourself, and a lot of other people we know from this kind of, I don't even like the word alternative health. Why alternative? Why not? Why isn't that the primary? Like we need to change the language, don't we?
This is extremely important what you're bringing up, and I don't know how deep to go there, but systematically, when the Western medicine evolved, with it, they pushed away everything that existed beforehand. Now, there was a lot of theory, the same with psychedelics. Up until the 50s, there was a hell of a lot of research done on it. Then all of a sudden it became banned. And now we're rediscovering, but it's not alternative. It's been there, it is here. It just has to be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, given a chance, given some airtime, and not suppressed, let's say. And so, no, it's great to see that, as you said, there's this kind of revolution or this opening. I think it's always been with people, but it's now, okay, well, what's permitted? What needs to be done behind the scenes? What can we bring out into light? And
Asking
so,
questions.
Yeah.
Asking the questions. As you said earlier, we go to the doctor who's basically at the risk of saying the wrong thing, who's basically the new priest. So you come to them for the answers, but inherently we have the capacity to ask questions, and we are not only have the capacity, we need to ask questions. Because the questions, you may not get an immediate answer, but at least it brings that flashlight, that awareness to the possibilities.
Right.
Is there only one way of doing things? Come up with 4 or 5 ways to do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think COVID showed us a lot of where we started the conversation, and people started asking more questions. I mean, not everyone, a lot of people went along with the ride and the quote unquote high level guidance, which has proved to be, disastrous. But a lot of people didn't. A lot of people did resist and ask questions and seek alternative ways of maintaining their mind-body health, right? Because as soon as we create worry and fear in people, and we know what the media and the propaganda does, it creates that fear, and that fear creates the illness that you're talking about. And we've seen it. It's been a textbook case. And it's hard to resist, but it requires the kind of training that you're talking about and that you're providing for folks. So that's why it's so important. That's why it's important to have these conversations and have more people tune in, not just out of starting with curiosity and questions, and then taking it to taking those chances and seeking out the experience. Because where do you start? Once you're open to it, then you got to find the right path, and then you got to figure out how to pay for it, because your insurance isn't covering those things. And these are the barriers right now that we have to work together to overcome and convince people it's worth it. You're going to pay for it, but it's worth it.
I fully agree with you. I think it has to do with, again, looking for opportunities. You can look at why you can't. What's stopping you? Oh, I don't have the funds. I don't have the time. I'm not good at these things. All these, and language. Language is very important. If you use negative language, if you're focused on what the limitations are, you basically draw them into your life. So
Right.
reframing, what do I need to do in order to get there? Okay, I can't afford a session by myself. Okay, join a group, see how that goes. Seek ways of exploring, discovering, change your mind ultimately. Change your mind, because the vessel or the Merkaba, this body that we inhibit, it's basically a communicator tool. Information coming in, information going out. And aligning between the internal and external brings about balance. If one is constantly anxious, the problem with anxiety is, like, fear is very clear. I'm afraid of spiders. Okay, we can deal with it. Anxiety is way more complicated because you can't quite put your finger on it even. And this is where these processes are critical. The person who was having anxiety attacks couldn't articulate what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so would you say, I'm translating, but you tell me if this makes sense to you. It's a form of self-knowledge, right? I mean, you can't put your finger on what's happening inside you and where these things might be happening subconsciously. These fears could be from your childhood. It could be these stories. So this is, in essence, a practice of gaining clarity, as you said, giving space so that you could gain some self-awareness, some self-knowledge, and operate more effectively with that knowledge.
I totally agree. This get to know yourself. Some people call it the waking up. Some people call it growth. There are many different words for it. But ultimately, it is about gaining self-knowing, loving self, critical, because we are constantly negotiating between love and fear. And when you're in fear, chances are you're not in love, not with yourself or anyone else.
Yeah.
So by somehow tapping into the natural resources, and we are able to move forwards.
Right. March 4th, right? I want to take a minute here again, just to welcome anyone who's watching us live here during your lunch break, or if it's the morning for you out in the West Coast or whatever part of the world you're in, through LinkedIn Live. This is something we're doing more of. Obviously, we'll have recordings available and different clips of some of these words of wisdom we're getting from Noam Gamady today. Of the new brand is Coach Landing, right? Is there a website, Noam, that we can put out there?
www.coachlanding.com.
Okay, coachlanding.com, and we'll also share it out through LinkedIn. If anyone has questions, because we've got another 20 or 30 minutes or so, of time, here together today. Anyone has questions, please put them through the chat in LinkedIn, and I'll try to squeeze in as many questions as we can towards the end. Maybe in the last 10 minutes, we'll save some time. But for now, I've got you to myself with questions I have in front of me here. I'm really curious, I'm a lifetime entrepreneur. I don't, even love the labels, even for myself, but that's, what I've been doing and working with different teams, building companies. I get very excited about ideas, but as we all know, ideas is, like they say, 1% inspiration, and then 99% is the actual work, which starts with building a team, building essentially a community. I mean, who's on board, who really wants to work on this? A, do they have the skills that you need? Of course, you need that. And B, or maybe even it should be A, is do they have the passion, the determination, those soft qualities, those more unseen qualities of being ready to work on something? Because entrepreneurship for me, and I know it's similar for you, it's just like the spiritual path. It's such a journey. It requires courage. There's no autopilot there. You know, no one puts bread on your table in the entrepreneurial journey. You have to go out and get it, right? And no one gives you a pat on the back because you put in a couple of years of good effort. You can still die, as can your company, as can your idea the next day. So it's definitely, I've likened it, and in my heart and mind, it's so similar, such a great parallel. At least it's been my journey. So the fact that you're working with startups and entrepreneurs, I want to hear more about that. Like, can you give us any example, or can we come up with some scenario? How do we talk about it more in terms of how that might be different than the other kind of work you had been doing beforehand, just directly with an individual or a couple? I know it's the same, but how is it different, or how are you? Yeah.
Let me just try to frame it. First of all, I fully resonate with what you're saying. Entrepreneur is basically, I mean, it's a visionary, and it comes with a premises, because there's an internal drive to create, to manifest, and with it comes some challenges. We were talking about, I mean, when you look at companies, there are stages of development which are very similar. I'm talking about, let's say, startups.
Right.
Very similar to a relationship. When you meet someone for the first time, at first there's the honeymoon. You're in love, nothing can go wrong. There's all these possibilities. Everyone's excited. I'll do whatever it takes. And over time, the needs change. All of a sudden, people want safety, security. They want clear roles. They want understanding. And it brings up also the misalignments, where
Right.
people are not happy. They're not happy with their role. They're overwhelmed. So similar to a relationship, how do you navigate these stages that allow people to, first of all, want to continue being involved? Whether it will succeed or won't, nobody has a crystal ball. At least not that I know of. You set a vision in mind, and you start manifesting it. Yes, getting the right people in. Now, getting the right people is part of what many entrepreneurs are very good at. They have a sixth sense. Who's the right person that can fill that void? Once you put a group of people together, there's a certain dynamics that have to be monitored and catered to, because all of a sudden the same things that irritate you in a relationship irritate you in the company. That person keeps on nagging you because they need information, and this is really not what you're interested in supporting them with. So the role is very similar. It's to help people to regulate, to help people to come to understandings. One of the areas that I love is conflict. Conflict for me, my definition of it is an opportunity to come to a new understanding. That's all it is. It's not a negative, it's not a positive. When there's a conflict, there's fire, there's friction, there's possibility. My goal is to harvest it, to bring it together, and okay, we know what we're disagreeing on. What can we agree on?
Right.
Another thought that is coming to mind is either it will be simple or it simply won't be.
Well put.
We get caught up in these huge visions, bigger picture, and sometimes you got to bring it down to the level of eye to eye, P to P. how do you keep that team alive? How do you meet their needs? Because sometimes there's no budget. Sometimes there's all kinds of restrictions. Do you value your people? So what I do is basically I support the visionary. I support the team in creating balance and harmony, in anticipating also strategy. Because, a couple gets together, they create a vision, and then they look for the strategies how to get there. Same with the entrepreneurs.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. So you get involved at that level. It's fascinating, because it does remind me a bit of, again, our 2 decades, plus at Blue Line are working with a lot of small companies, entrepreneurs, whether it's a solo practitioner or a small family business. And it's like, I always, joked about it, but found that you basically become like the therapist for the CEO, for the founders, to help make sure they don't lose their good people because they're neglecting them or they're taking them for granted, which happens quite a bit. And people are juggling, as you said, so many roles, but at some point people want more definition. Well, that's not my job, but I'm doing it because I know they need help, but I don't want to ask for more money, but I'm frustrated, and like the founders, they're so busy and just taking it for granted and thinking, well, I can just replace them if they leave, but no, you can't. They've been here for 5 years. They know things you don't even know about your own business. So bringing awareness to those kinds of things. I mean, I've spent a lot of time doing that. And then as an agency, of course, we come in, can fill some gaps, but I love this strategic role and bringing mindfulness to that whole process, which is what it sounds like, Coach Landing is doing.
Really, it's about having a discussion, asking the questions, seeing where, we have blind spots. We all have blind spots, including you and me. And sometimes you need a clear mirror. Basically, this process, whether I'm working with an individual or a company, it's to give a clear mirror. Sometimes you have to cut the arm off because it's not working. It's painful. It's uncomfortable. There's a lot of, it will bring, especially for the visionaries, they don't want that confrontation. They don't want to be the bad person.
Right. Right. So let's do this, right? Like, and I'm this really just coming off the top of my head. So go with me on this if you can, if you're willing to. I'm just going to make up a scenario right now and play the role, right? Okay. We're just meeting. You were referred to me. Hey, Noam, I heard about Coach Landing, and you're well referred. So I got this company. I'm just going to be one of the guys. It's me and three partners. We started together a few years ago. We built up kind of nice. We had a singular product or service that we all had a good balance, good agreement on. We've grown the company now. We're doing, $5-7 million a year in business, and there's great potential for growth. But what's happening now is, the 4 partners are kind of in their own silos. There's new ideas, new products, new services. It doesn't seem like we're in sync as much as we were in the beginning. One of the partners altogether is not really even doing anything anymore. He's just collecting a check. He's off on the beach. He's chasing, his personal dreams, so it seems. And yet our original agreement, which was, 25% each, is now doesn't seem like it's working anymore. And we've got a staff of 60, 70 people, all in different parts of the world. And there's a lot of resentment, a lot of entitlement, a lot of, seems like everyone's gotten more selfish, at the top and then throughout the company. It seems like there's almost this kind of cancer going through. We're still making money. We're still delivering some good products, but there's some cracks that are starting to show up. And it seems like we can't even get on a Zoom call or in the room together because everyone's got a different schedule. Everyone thinks the world revolves around them, right? So we've got four heroes here, and Yeah, so we're really struggling. There's some potential opportunities to sell the company. We can't even agree on getting together on the phone. So I was referred to you. I mean, where do we start? How long is this going to take? How can you help us? What do you propose? Like, talk to me.
First thing is, thank you for sharing. Let's just acknowledge the fact that you're finally realizing that there are challenges, that things aren't as smooth. Yes, it started beautifully, and there was a clear understanding on where you were going. And it sounds like over time, things have shifted. There's many more people involved. There's different agendas. And it would make sense to, first of all, begin to speak to each one of the partners or the leadership team to see what their version of the story is, that same story. What are they experiencing? To understand, because in order to come, clearly the old understanding is not working.
Yeah.
25%, nice idea. It may have worked in the beginning, but it's out of balance right now. So my proposal is, first of all, let's get into a room. I can interview each and every one of you to get an assessment and to translate what I'm hearing here, because I hear your version and it sounds very clear. I'd love to speak to the one on the beach to get a sense of what their experience is.
You're probably going to have to go to the beach in order to have that conversation, but that's part of the challenge, Noam, is I'm not sure. It's kind of, I guess, maybe when couples start therapy, one wants to, one doesn't. I'm not sure I mean, this is me having this private conversation with you, haven't talked to the others. Did try to bring something up once that maybe we should bring in something outside, and two of the other, partners shut that down. We definitely, to the point you just mentioned, have a layer of management underneath the partners that are, some of which are vital, some of which have been with us since the beginning. We've actually lost a couple of very important people that I certainly didn't want to lose, but we did, because they just didn't feel like they were being valued or they saw the vision anymore. So I think besides the four at the top, there's like another leadership layer of another, I would say 5 or 6 folks that are vital to our future, especially if we want to spend more time on the beach and less time growing the company. We need to depend on that next level, and then the 50 or so people under. So first and foremost, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It sounds like employee retention is something that is important for you.
I believe it is. I'm not sure if everyone would concur, or they may think, again, people are replaceable, and some may be, but some have been with us since the beginning, and I know they believed in the initial vision, but because of this kind of cancer that I mentioned, or this kind of crack, in the armor, which maybe it's part of what comes with some level of success, but it's feeling like it's dangerous at this point. If we don't come together or find a way to find some new compromises or a new vision, or refresh the vision, like you said, it seems like it's been outdated. So, okay. So you propose first and foremost to meet with the partners individually, not together.
The partners individually, to gather information, first of all, to understand where the partners are at, where is the leadership below at, why are people leaving right now, what is going on in this relationship, this startup, this experience that is pushing people away. And beyond the people and the company, it's you personally. How can I support you as an individual? Because it sounds like it's really important for you, for this project, for this startup to succeed, to continue to thrive. And you may not be able to change everyone else's mind, but is it important for you to get clear on what you can do moving forwards?
Yes. No, I can certainly use some assistance there, just in my personal aspect of the journey. Let me ask you this, since I'm also the one in charge of the checkbook at the company, which is sometimes a point of contention, but it's, we're looking at our benefits, our wellness, obviously important to make everyone in the company feel that as we're growing, we're looking to take care of each other and ourselves. what, and I'd love, and I've heard that you also work with groups and do different types of bioenergetics and things of that nature. And those things, from what I understand, wouldn't be covered by our insurance. What should I be budgeting if I want to make a proposal to bring you in at the partner level, at the management level, and then an all company level? And I believe we're local. Our office is, in New York, which isn't far from you. Can you give me a ballpark on a proposal on like how many hours a week you think you could spend if it was carte blanche, right? And we wanted you to come in, and I don't know if you work with a team or bring other people in, or if you're coming in solo. Tell us what I should be thinking to budget to have you come in, and over what period of time, at least for a first phase of this project. Is it 3 months? Is it quarterly? How should we look at it?
Look, let's look at it as a menu. There are different possibilities. Number one, I feel it would be very helpful for me to work with you one-on-one. Then we can put in 2-3 hours a week. I will need to interview or to speak to the other people. I'm guessing that we can probably do 15 hours a week to start with. It'll take a couple of weeks to go over the main personnel. And then I'm going to propose some workshops where we can work in smaller groups or in a bigger group and begin to develop an understanding or new understanding to understand what the pulse is and how we can get realigned here. Overall, you're looking at 2-3 months, potentially. We can work indefinitely, but in order to bring back the company and the vision on track, we may need to discuss the vision again, because the vision that you agreed upon 3 years ago has shifted by the sound of it.
Right.
The organizational charts, are people in the right places right now?
Right.
There's a whole conversation that.
No, I'd love to look at all of it, but so from my understanding, about 12-15 hours a week over a quarter, at roughly 100 an hour. What kind of rate would you give for something like that? If it was like packaged
between
up?
$100 $150 an hour.
Okay. 100 to 150 an hour. Okay. Yeah, we work with other consultants and other disciplines, and lawyers charge a lot more than that. So I think that we could be amenable. And would the implementation that you mentioned, like these workshops, be something that we can work into our normal day-to-day schedule, or would it require off-site and weekend and alternative hours? Because that could be tricky.
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, it really depends, as you were saying earlier, on the budget. Primarily, the goal is to take an hour off in the middle of the day, lunch break or whatever, to have a Zoom meeting if it's people from abroad, in person. We can do off-site, but that is a whole other story that needs to be planned. But ultimately, it's about realigning, and it could be done locally.
Okay, great. Because that would be my goal after the quarter, to see that whether we need to ratchet it down or up, but to keep this service as a part of our wellness program, as just a part of our overall strategic alignment. That would be my goal. But let me bring it to the partners and get back to you. Thank you for that, Noam. That was great. So I got a couple of questions coming through, and then we'll wrap up. Just really mainly people want to know, besides the website, because you mentioned even in this call, like workshops, and hey, you can't afford the single. What about a group? Do you offer anything like a podcast or some kind of meetup or something that could be an introductory taste? I mean, besides what people are getting here, which I think is great. How can people take a step further with your work?
In terms of podcast, you can check out the Upside of Over. We did a series of conversations, and it's really about, it comes from compassionate communication or nonviolent communication, which when things come to an end, what is the upside? What is the possibility? How do you reframe? And that can be found, it's called the Upside of Over. It can be found on Spotify.
Okay, iTunes, maybe Spotify. Okay, The Upside of Over. We'll take a look out. You have about 8-9 episodes there?
Yep. And
Great.
in addition to that, I do groups on and off. It's all advertised in the website.
Okay.
When something is coming up-
Coachlanding.com.
Yep, coachlanding.com.
Awesome. Awesome. My friend Noam Gamady, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's a great reconnection. We haven't spoken in a while, so this is a chance for us to catch up personally, as well as to share our conversation and your pearls of wisdom with the world at large. So thank you.
Arman, thank you for having me over. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. I really enjoy the unpredictability of like, where are we going today? Oh, okay, fine. Flexibility.
Exactly. Something I know we both value, and it's part of the dance, right? And part of just enjoying this process instead of, here's 20 questions and let's pass this test. Listen, it's great to dance with you in these conversations, and I hope we're going to keep it up and get that in person. We'll plan that soon offline. All right, Noam, thank you for joining today, and thanks for the audience for listening in. And we'll see you next week, next time on the Polymath Project. Thanks, Noam. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.